and welcome back to the Strong Collectors Podcast. I'm Dakota, and with my co-host, as always, is Jordan. So we're going to today be talking about our most recent 2 episodes, and that was our interview with Todd McFarlane. So if you haven't listened to the Todd McFarlane interview, go back and listen to that. That one, unsurprisingly, is our most listened to episode. I don't know why, but it was a ton of fun.
I don't know why either. That's strange to me.
It was a ton of fun getting to talk to Todd. Like I think I said in the podcast, we thought we were only going to get 30 minutes with him. Todd talked to us for 2 hours and almost starved my wife. She was waiting for dinner in the other room while Jordan and I were recording. So go back, listen to that, watch it on YouTube, and do that probably before you listen to this, because today we're going to be talking about what we wish we would have said, or it was much more interview style where Jordan and I asked the questions and then Todd responded. There wasn't a ton of dialogue. So if we would have had more back and forth, these are some of those things that we would have said, or some of the thoughts that we maybe had after talking to Todd, after listening to the podcast back ourselves. Because, I myself have listened to the podcast now, both parts, twice. I think Jordan has also listened to it at least twice. And you should also listen to it twice as well.
I just have it on repeat, actually, just constantly on my TV.
All those views and listens are actually just you.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. So we're going to get into that kind of segment by segment. So what we talk about here might be kind of confusing if you don't first listen to that. But you if you just are really opposed to listening to our interview with Todd, you might enjoy this one too. But before we get into that stuff, Jordan, it's been a little bit since we've done a What You Got segment. So would you like to lead us off in What You Got?
I would love to. So I know I'm seeing everyone on the groups getting their, well, not everyone, some people getting their retro rhinos. I recently acquired the Build-A-Figure rhino here. He's pictured here with his kind of ridiculous screaming head that you and I have made a lot of jokes about. He's also got the masked head. I don't know. I think you know that I love my Fearsome Foes rhino that has that more classic comic booky look. This one's a little more like modern looking, I would say. It's kind of more muted colors. It's like darker.
Yeah.
I would say. Sort of a darker gray. I don't know. He seems alright. A little stiff. Maybe he needs to just be played with and, need to show him some love. But I'm curious to see what the retro is like now that I think I'm going to sell the Build-A-Figure here. Not really too attached to it. But I got it for a good price, so it's kind of fun to say I had it. You've had this one before, haven't you?
I have never had that one before, no.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you had.
Nope. Never seen it in person.
Must be from my other podcast. So yeah, he's alright. Like I said, curious about the retro. Are we wanting to do like 1 for 1? Do you want me to just do mine? I've only got 3.
It does make sense for me to segue into
okay.
My What You Got. So I have the retro rhino, which Jordan has mentioned that his Build-A-Figure rhino is a little bit darker in color. This one's a little bit lighter gray. Same figure, essentially. Some slight retoolings of things. I think the Build-A-Figure has
have
these
like these little bubbles on his body?
Yeah, a little bit. He doesn't have the shoulder pads though that the Build-A-Figure has. So I think they took the shoulder pads off and filled in those holes. So it wasn't like the Venom that we got that has the holes from the shoulder pads on Omega Red. I think maybe it was the shoulder pads. I don't know why there was holes on Omega Red, but the Build-A-Figure kind of comes with a more normal grimacing face, so it's not quite as ridiculous looking as the Build-A-Figure, which I like this one a lot better. And then he also comes with the closed mouth, but he comes in the oversized card, which I have here, which is
Dakota's holding it
well
up to his
over.
head.
It's well
and it's
over
quite
the size
big.
of my head. I mean, if I put the retro armored Spider-Man, like he's almost the same size as the picture of the Rhino on the oversized blister card. So I know I've talked about that before on the podcast, how much I love the giant box that Kingpin came in, and I still had that same feeling of holding a giant action figure box when I got the retro Rhino. So big fan. I highly recommend him. I mean, this one was only like $40, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, the way prices are going, for $40, this one actually feels worth it. Some of those other $40 figures, we might have to get into that in another episode, but this one, I think Hasbro did a good job. I feel like I got my money worth with this one. So I'll throw it back to you, Jordan.
All right, and staying on the theme of villains, I've got a Mystique here. I believe this one was the Lilandra figure. Is that right? No,
Well, yeah, I mean, it came with a Lilandra head, but I think it was a
Lilandra
Walgreens
head, but it was
exclusive.
a Walgreens exclusive. Why do I keep thinking that? Walgreens exclusive. This is kind of a interesting story. So we were watching the X-Men movies. My almost said fiance, my wife and I.
I was going to say, you're going to have to do, like, another part of your what you got is going to be the ring on your hand.
That's right. That's right. So I've got Mystique here, and I bought her, and she came only with the big gun, and I had been told she had the big gun and the extra head and the little gun, but because she didn't come with all those, I was just refunded, so I got a free Mystique, which not a bad deal. I don't know. I mean, definitely improvement over the Toy Biz version.
Oh, yeah.
My issue is still probably it's like just sort of like painted on textures. I mean, she's got this little belt, but everything else is just kind of, I guess, as it normally goes. But it'd be nice if you had like textured boots and gloves and stuff. Makes me think I'm going to have to start getting more Brotherhood of Mutants, probably, because I've also gotten a couple more X-Men recently. So that's continuing.
You've got Toad on the way.
I've got Toad on the way, that's true. I think I still need a good classic Magneto, but I'm kind of hoping we get one issued that's newer.
I would assume they would put one out in the VHS.
Sam's. And then can I springboard into my last one here,
Yeah,
which is I know what you're thinking, Dakota, and to all of our viewers and our listeners, maybe you can sense it. Oh my goodness, did Jordan just get a Mafex Todd McFarlane Spider-Man? Because that's what it looks like. But you'd be wrong. This is a knockoff of a Mafex Todd McFarlane Spider-Man. He cost me about $25, so I was not too worried about taking a chance on him. And this is, you saw it this weekend, Dakota, but he's pretty good for what I paid for him. I mean, he's got the extra heads, extra hands, the magnet hands, magnet feet, web lines, and you can just get him into some real cool poses. Like he can crouch a lot, he can, do the hands out, web slaying. I think he's pretty cool. I like him a lot. I mean, there's a little part of me that it feels like the Mafex would be more sturdy because he does feel in some ways a little fragile. But overall, this is kind of I might have to say a new favorite for me.
Oh, wow.
Until maybe I end up with a actual Mafex, which I don't know. Not sure when that day will come, but
probably have to wait for a brand new figure that you can get hot off the press and not have to pay the secondary prices, because I know that actual figure is, I think, over $150, maybe up into the $200 range. Maybe I'm crazy, but
yeah. No, I'd probably never pay the aftermarket price on a Mafex, just out of principle. But
yeah,
I like him a lot. I think he's cool, and if you want the experience of a Mayfax without having to pay top dollar, I think it's a pretty good substitute.
But do you
At
get the
least
full experience without taking a hit to the wallet like a Mayfex would give you?
I was about to say you don't. I can't say because I've never. Have you ever held a Mayfax?
I
I
never have,
haven't.
no. I think I tried to
So
get you to get the Mayfex animated Batman one time.
you did.
Yeah, I mean, even seeing that one in your hands, it looks like that Spider-Man Classics McFarlane Spider-Man, except a little bit nicer with, I mean, like you'd be able to keep him in those poses, which that other Spider-Man is 20 years old now, so it makes
Yeah.
sense that that one doesn't hold up quite as well. The joints are a little bit loose and stuff, but who knows, maybe after 20 years that one's joints would get loose. But yeah, no, that looks really cool.
My joints will be loose in 20 years. They're already getting loose, so I get it.
All right, so I'll
But
take over
all right,
the what you got. So I'll go a little bit quicker. I've got a few. I like to show off everything I get.
I know.
But we were able to find a Scream at one of the local shops in Des Moines when I was back for Jordan's wedding. So not one that I really expected to ever get because Scream in the aftermarket is at least $50. I've really never seen it go for much less than that. But she's going to go well with my other symbiotes. I've got a lot of them, just not Lasher and Superior Venom because of those tendrils. But she's cool. Happy to add her. Maybe one of these days I'll have a symbiote display behind me. Today it's a little bit more McFarlane heavy. I also got in a lot, which I was expecting to sell this guy, but now that I have him, he's so substantial that I may keep this Hulkbuster Build-A-Figure. So this is the Iron Man suit from the movie where he's fighting Hulk, and I'm honestly surprised that Hasbro would make such a large Build-A-Figure because a lot of their Build-A-Figures usually aren't this big and heavy. So that reason alone makes me want to keep him. I've seen people talk about him. They really like him, but I've never seen him in person, so happy to have him. Might be sticking around for a little while. Another Build-A-Figure I got was the DCUC. I just forgot his name. Jordan?
Started with a K, didn't it? Or a C?
Calabac?
There you go.
Is that right?
Sounds right.
Yeah, so he's got these gnarly, almost alligator-type teeth. Big yellow lantern, second hand to Sinestro. Another super substantial figure, very heavy. I think this is like the exact same figure except for the head as Kilowog, another Build-A-Figure from DCUC, but I mean, maybe he didn't have such clawed hands, but seems like it would have been a reuse. Sticking with the DCUC, also got a classic Blue Beetle. Pretty happy about him. He usually goes for, I don't know, a little bit more on the aftermarket. Found him for cheaper at the same place we found Scream. So happy to add him to my DCUC collection. I've got Booster Gold, so I'm happy to get them paired up together. Another one that Jordan and I both got was the VHS box Wolverine. You can kind of see him up on the display behind me here if you're watching on video. Also Jubilee, not too far up next to him. I think we're going to kind of dive into these a little bit more in a later episode. I would say overall I'm pretty happy with the Wolverine. I really like that head sculpt. He's kind of got the like exaggerated, I think Sam and Savannah called it his eyebrows. But it's just that mask, like the black part of his mask. That I think that's my favorite head sculpt out of any of the other Wolverines, just because it's more forward instead of going back.
Gives him a little more volume.
Exactly. Good articulation on him. Pretty happy with him. Jubilee, a little less happy with her. She felt really cheap and flimsy right out of the package. Head sculpts were like the exact same, so that was kind of disappointing. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably, we're going to get into that later. I don't know. We'll get into that
Dakota
later.
has a lot of thoughts on the VHS toys.
I have a lot of thoughts on the VHS.
No, yeah, I'd like to talk about those too, and we should probably save that for another segment or something. But
yeah. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for my VHS and what you got. So with that being said, let's get into the everything we wish we would have said on the McFarlane interview. So I think getting right into it, we'll try to go chronologically here. The first
And
thing
this
that
is
I
also
thought,
in some ways kind of a recap of sorts, I feel. Like we're
true.
going to kind of, for me, I think also of like what are the big takeaways from the interview, because in 2 hours a lot of things were said and heard, but we're trying to also distill down to what we think are maybe the most, I don't know, newsworthy tidbits of information that we picked up.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the way we usually end up talking, we think it's going to be a short recap. We might talk just as long as we did with McFarlane, so may not save you much time there, but we'll cover some good stuff. So first things first, right once we jumped onto the podcast, Todd was very accurate. He said, we got the big shots. Jordan and I are the big shots. Next, though, we talked about, in addition to being a strong collector, how that also means being a smart collector. And Todd had kind of mentioned some of the things where he would go out and find the hot items now. Don't be married to the things that are going crazy on the market today, because you can find them again in the future. If you can sell it now, you can kind of fund your collecting, which is essentially what Jordan and I like to do. If we have something in our collection that explodes and gets really popular, we'll usually try to move that so that we can purchase new things and grow the collection. Once that thing dies off, we go looking for that. So right now that Walgreens exclusive Moon Knight is a good example of that, because we both had that Moon Knight. It was getting hot. I sold mine probably a little too soon. You sold yours when it was kind of at its peak, and it peaked out at like maybe a little bit over $100. And then already now, like this week, I've seen it several times listed for 80, 70, even some for like 45. So that's dropping off pretty quick. So if you were able to sell it for 100, you could buy 2 of them now. So I thought that was pretty interesting, listening to him talk about when he would try to sell sports cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, just kind of that philosophy of, I guess a lot of the time as we've even looked at things, people kind of almost look down on you making money selling toys, which has kind of always been a strange perspective to me. I know we've talked about that, but it's like you can ask what you want for something. Like he even got into that, right? Some guy could sell the same thing across from him, a different kind of card for way more, but he's only got one, whereas Todd kind of talked about the idea of selling maybe a little less than like top dollar, but you'll move it faster. Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of cashing in on the hype of something. I think that's agree. Smart. But yeah, it was kind of cool to hear his views on, I guess, collecting in that way, which sort of segues into the thing Todd loves to collect, which we had no idea, is board games.
That's true.
And you got to see some of and hear some of that in the interview, but we definitely had to trim a little bit out because his passion for board games was just bleeding through.
It was. Jordan and I were sweating during the board game talk because, like I said, originally when we had booked Todd McFarlane for this interview, we thought we were getting him for 30 minutes, and he spent the first, I believe it was 27 minutes of our conversation. We had the little bit of chit-chat beforehand, but up until the 27-minute mark, we were talking about board games. So Jordan and I were kind of, sweating because we had action figure questions to ask him and movie questions, and I had no idea that Todd was so into board games.
Yeah, that was interesting. Probably the biggest takeaway for me for that was that he talked about creating a Spawn board game, which I think would be really cool. I think he explained how it would make sense. You just kind of shrink down the miniatures, and I know you talked about that idea of him making it kind of one of those hexagonal board games where you can kind of go in multiple directions, and to me it sounds like something that's kind of inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of a matter of time of when he's going to do that. So I wonder what like overlap that will have with collectors of figures. Like will that
Mm-hmm.
appeal mainly to Spawn fans? If toy people will want it, I think it'd be cool. I mean, I'm slowly being converted to a Spawn fan,
Yeah.
and been reading some of the comics. I may or may not have a Spawn figure on the way soon. So, I'd be excited to see that. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't remember if this got cut out of the podcast or not, but I thought it was crazy when he was talking about doing his Kickstarter, his original Kickstarter, where he was breaking records and like most sold, most dollars made when the Spawn figure was, I think they made like $3 million, and that was breaking records for action figures. And he said at the same time there was a board game on Kickstarter that was selling for, I mean, they made like $15 million. So that's where he, I think, really got his, I mean, he loves board games to begin with, but then when he saw the potential with the money that you could make, I mean, that was super surprising to me. So I think that'd be a huge way for him to kind of monetize Spawn and bring him into like a new crowd. Because like you said, Spawn fans will probably buy it. You and I might buy it. And then you could break into the board game folks, and maybe those board game folks play the Spawn game. They like it. They start reading the comics, and you're able to bring in some new fans with board games. So definitely cool. One I'd be interested to see. I highly doubt it's going to be the next Kickstarter that he does, because he had mentioned, or not mentioned, but he has teased several times now, I think, that it's going to be the medieval Spawn, but maybe his third Kickstarter is going to be the video game.
Board game.
Yes, board game. We already have the Spawn video game. I've not heard good reviews of the video game. That's like a PlayStation 1 game, I think.
Oh, well, maybe he'll do a new one.
Yeah, a new one would be cool. After the movie comes out, maybe we get a Spawn video game, but we'll get into the movie a little bit later. Anything else you have on board games, Jordan?
No. I think Todd said it all in our interview, so
that's true.
I think we're covered.
We may have to release a unedited version of the podcast with all of the board game chat in there, so you guys can hear all the sports games he started with and kind of how that evolved and what he's playing now. But after that, we talked about getting into action figures, and the action figures on the shelf at the time were kind of those older Star Wars. You had like 5 points of articulation. If the head moved, arms go up and down, legs go up and down, head moves side to side, and that was kind of capping out your maximum articulation. And he said, why do they have to look this boring and hardly move? So that's when he created his line of toys, because he didn't trust other people to make them as cool as he thought they should be. So I thought that was pretty cool, because we had the first Spawn action figure. I don't have it on display anymore, but that was cool to bring out. And that one really didn't have much more articulation. It had knee joints, and that was it. But the detail of that Spawn figure with the cape is huge, and he was winning awards with that because, I mean, it was going up against like a Luke Skywalker that it just looked boring. So pretty cool to hear that, and kind of his creation of toys.
I agree.
Going more into the toys, talked about having more plastic in the box to make you feel like you're getting your value out of it, which I appreciate, but I don't necessarily know if I fully agree with, just because I think, like, the example we said in the episode was the she Spawn. She comes with a ton of different, like, an axe, spear thing, some other, like, real chain, machete, sniper, lots of weapons. Because it's a female figure, females figures are usually, like, more slim. They're not, like, big buff. Like, Rhino is huge. She Spawn is smaller. So he wants to have more plastic in the box to make you feel like you're getting your money's worth. And same with Clown. Clown comes with the big like backpack thing where the cannons like raise up higher. I personally would rather spend a little bit less on Clown to not get that backpack and just buy a Clown figure. Similarly with She-Spawn, I don't really need all those weapons. I just want a She-Spawn figure. However, I really like the fact that he's thinking about those things and he's like, oh, well, I want to put the same amount of weight in the box so that when they open it, they're still getting the same value. And I'm not like being cheap by like saving on plastic, making them charge the same thing. Because he talked about that, like charging the same amount for chips, but putting less chips in the bag.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, inherently the notion of getting more in something is better, right? Usually if you buy something, the more you have of it, it's worth more. So I get that kind of dictating some of his choices as far as how he's going to make figures or which figures he's going to make. It doesn't seem like he's married to that rule, though, so to speak, because he talked about, what did he say, specifically Mr. Miracle. You know, I could sell a Mr. Miracle, just make him look really cool.
Yeah.
So I do think he...
But then Mr. Miracle is a dude, so he's going to be, on average, larger than, like...
Yeah. I don't see him as like a...
I mean, yeah, he's not... I mean, he's got the cape, so that probably helps him out a little bit to add size. But,
so that's just interesting, though, to kind of think about, I guess, how that affects his choices of which figures to make.
Right. I agree. And kind of...
me.
I mean, we talked about, like, instead of adding plastic to the box, adding paper to the box, because he's got his page punchers. They were up for pre-order a few weeks ago now. Where you're getting a figure and the comic book, where the small ones, which are kind of going back to the like arms go up and down, legs go up and down, head side to side, comes with a comic book, like a key issue comic of that character. And then he released the larger, like kind of the same line as the DC multiverse, where there's Black Adam, Constantine, Superman, and Batman, I believe is the lineup for them. And they come with all the same issue. And you and I had talked about how it's kind of disappointing where, like, if I want that whole series, I'm going to end up with just the same comic over and over. So I had asked something along the lines of, like, what if you did with Spawn? Because, I mean, he's not going to write a new miniseries for DC, but he would write a new miniseries for Spawn. What if you did Spawn Page Punchers, where you got like a 4-issue miniseries. Each figure comes with a different issue. You have to collect all the figures to collect the whole story. I think that's a cool idea, but he was thinking that it was less good idea because he didn't want to cause the, like, it seemed like comic book stores to lose out on either the comic book sales or the fans. He didn't want to have to, like, force them to buy something. Which, I mean, I guess it's similar to like a Build-A-Figure where like maybe you don't want to force everyone to buy the whole line, but you do have to kind of buy the figure to collect your Build-A-Figure. But I think he didn't want to mess with his relationship with the comic book stores.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that kind of ties into what our other big takeaway is that he just... I do think it's very much in the mindset of how do you always keep the consumer on your side and how do you have a good relationship with the consumer. And I think that's pretty fascinating. And I think maybe a lot of people say that, but he does seem to really believe that and actually implement that in how he does business, which kind of ties into... what was the next thought you had there?
The Kickstarters and how...
Kickstarters, yeah.
He had mentioned that he wants his he did his Spawn Kickstarter, like I mentioned a little bit ago. And rather than having everyone pre-order their Kickstarter and then, I don't know, say like a month or two before everyone gets their Kickstarter, he has another Kickstarter that ends before you ever get the first one. So he's getting your money, and then asking for more and then giving you the first product, like, I don't know, maybe HasLab, for example, which, I mean, we got Galactus, so,
Well,
I mean, we obviously support HasLab, but I did think that was pretty shady of Hasbro to have a Sentinel on the way, not in anyone's hands yet, but then ask for another $400 for their next HasLab, and then they send you the first one without, because Todd had said he wants the people to get his product, have it in hand, make the decisions for themselves of like, oh yes, this was a good investment, I like this thing, this was good quality, I want more of this, rather than HasLab and Hasbro saying, oh, look at this cool thing we're going to send you. We'll send you another one too, but you can't look at the quality of the first one.
And everyone had those issues, remember, with the Sentinel, with the knees, and, you know, you have to wonder, would people who bought Galactus not have gotten it had they known about that? I don't know. I mean, hopefully things are fixed with Galactus and he doesn't have those same issues. But yeah, it does kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth if you already bought something and then you got the precursor to that and it's not really as good as you thought. It's like, well, shoot, what do I do now?
Right.
So
yeah, I just really respect that he would do that and like give fans the chance to really critique and judge and make their own decision before trying to squeeze them for a little bit more money. Not that that's what Hasbro's doing, but maybe we'll have to have them on the podcast and ask them what the deal is. So
very nice. Yeah, I totally agree. I think then the next other kind of thought I had, I guess, was about the Batman Year 2. It was kind of the thought, because we had talked about wanting to bring up some issues we had, and I was glad to know that he seemed pretty aware of the Batman Year 2, because I think a lot of people are like, does he even care? Does he even know? It seems like kind of what we suspected was he designed it with the big cape in mind. Maybe some other people got involved and said, well, let's add in some extra arms that you can port in and out. And then he admitted that there was an issue with that it just didn't get either molded right or produced correctly. He did say you should be able to talk to customer service and get new arms, but I haven't done that yet.
I haven't done that either. I would take that with a grain of salt, and I don't know. I mean, he said it was true, so I don't have any reason to not believe him because I haven't tried, but don't get too disappointed if it doesn't work out.
I think I'm going to try it, Dakota. Might do that tonight.
All right. See how it works.
I will report back on our next episode. Let you know.
Let us know. I think kind of in that same, like that was in our grievance section. Another one of our grievance was the ball joint ankles specifically. I mean, I also could say the same thing about the ball joint wrists. He kind of explained on camera like why he wanted it to be that way. Because if you stand this way and if you lunge to the side, you're still going to have your foot flat on the floor. But I don't feel like that really answered any of our questions of why the ball joint, because I mean, like I take Scream here. Scream doesn't have a ball joint ankle, but I can put her leg out to the side and I can ankle pivot and then her foot is still flat.
But so how far, like, can you move her ankle forward?
Forward as like up and down?
Like, yeah.
Less so. I mean, she pretty much goes just barely past flat.
What this ball joint Spidey can do, though.
I mean, let's put his leg down straight. We're testing this out live on the show. I mean,
testing it out.
Black Spider-Man, his foot goes up a bit. But I mean, do you need their feet to be like? Do you need their toes on their shins?
Sometimes.
I mean, they at least go back. I think the more important part is the foot goes back so that the like heel comes up, toe is pointed, like kind of flat with the shin.
Yeah.
That's where I would be more concerned rather than the like lifting his foot so high, like lifting his toe so high up.
I think personally there's pros and cons to both ways. I don't know if technology has perfected the perfect blend yet.
I'm still going to say that Hasbro has the far superior ankle joints because
I'm
I
not
think they're
saying
also
it's
more
not
sturdy.
superior. I'm just saying it doesn't have the same range of motion.
You have one interview with Todd McFarlane, Jordan, and it's changed you.
I was gonna say, dude, I think I'm now a bigger McFarlane fan than you are. I'm just gonna go on record with that.
Really? I don't think your collection shows that that is the case.
It's because
But
I'm a smart, selective collector,
okay,
dude.
okay. I don't know this the ball. I would like to have pushed him a little
No,
bit harder on the ball
I
joints.
know. I think my brain was still processing like what he was saying, and I was like,
Yeah,
I think that makes sense.
and
Which
you
in
were kind
some
of
ways
like
it
you had in
does.
your hand the ball joint ankle, and you were kind of like discovering like, oh, you have to hold it and turn it, and like it does take a
Yeah.
little bit more finessing to get that better range of motion. But he had also mentioned, I think, in our podcast about how like if the factory makes it too stiff or too loose. But I feel like with Hasbro's ankles, they're just more sturdy. Like Man Thing back here is always falling over sideways because it's a bigger, heavier figure that doesn't
Swamp
have
Thing?
great ankle. Yeah, Swamp Thing falls over because he doesn't have the like sturdy ankles.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I do have the similar issue with my zombie Captain America keeps falling off my desk, but that's more so just
Mm-hmm.
because he's got smaller feet, and I've tried to pose him like a zombie, but I don't know, man. Those ball
Mm-hmm.
joints are still bugging me, but he is kind of like changing them. Like with Haunt has different ankles, Ninja Spawn has different ankles that are still ball joint ish, but not quite
Yeah.
the ugly ball joints. So
And it seems like he responds to criticism and feedback to say like, well,
yeah,
I don't think he's just gonna say, well, too bad you get ball joints forever. Like I think
right,
he's like, okay, how can I experiment here? Maybe make
yeah,
compromises in some ways. So,
yeah. And I don't know, maybe Hasbro has some patent on these ankles that he can't get in with.
good
Because I
thought.
mean, like my DCUCs they don't have any sort of ankle pivoting. It's just up and down, and that's it for those.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe it's something like that, but not sure. But I mean, even in that same vein of articulation, I would like more of like a meshing of the things that I love about Hasbro and the things I love about McFarlane, where Hasbro articulates so much better than Hasbro or better than McFarlane, but McFarlane's look so much more detailed. Everything is like sculpted on there. The textures are there. All that stuff is way cooler on McFarlane's,
Yeah.
but they don't move around. Like I can't get them in quite as many poses. So some figures that doesn't matter as much, but
Mm-hmm.
he had
Yeah,
talked
I
about
get
like
you.
not wanting to mess up the sculpt of like Spawn's lines that kind of come down from his shoulders down to his belt, where if you like add in a like twist in the torso and the lines get messed up, I guess maybe I'm not the same as other collectors, but I would rather be able to move him and mess up those lines or put him in the same pose where the lines are still good. So
Mm-hmm.
having that option I think is cool versus like you have to keep your lines. No deciding.
Yeah.
I hope that
And then
I
that,
want to mix my fingers, my figures. All right,
and
go
then
ahead.
kind of springboarding out of that, we talked. You got a little lesson from Todd in the nature of cloth good capes and such.
Mm-hmm.
Which he said he likes, but still feels like you can't quite simulate, just the idea of on cloth, on people, it's spread out, it's much bigger, it folds in certain ways, the light hits it in certain ways. When you just take a strip or swath of little swatch of cloth and shrink it down, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really behave the same way as a like cape should. On like it doesn't act like it's 1/12 scale. It's still full scale, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense to me. I thought it was cool that he talked about like different ways to like starch it or like use different materials. That's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. I wonder if we'll see any more of that, like after Batman Year 2. Maybe he wants to experiment more there. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Um,
that Batman Year 2 cloth cape is pretty cool.
yeah, I
I'm
do too.
personally pretty happy with it, even though I'm never going to use it because I'm keeping mine in the like harder plastic cape. But I still think it's a really cool cape. I mean, wires in it would be nice, but I still think
Yeah,
like the
it's
way it
cool.
falls, the size of it, it's
Yeah.
good. I will say
I'd like
like,
to see him.
go ahead.
I'd just like to see him do more with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Uh,
think kind of how he mentioned how like the material doesn't act the same way on a 6-inch figure versus a 6-foot human. Like you could take the old Toy Biz Blade or Gambit, who had the like trench coats, and I never really liked having those on my figures because they never really acted like a coat. Like it would always be like flared open, and you couldn't really get it to do what you wanted it to do. So I always took those off the figures, even when you're posing them. Like it just poses weird,
Yeah.
and I'm not a fan of it. So that did make sense. Maybe using a lighter material where it's able to kind of fold more naturally would be better, but I'm glad that he's trying to experiment with that.
Yeah.
Next up, we talked about how he still has his ultimate spawn that he hasn't done yet, which I agree. Like, it's kind of why I have the Mortal Kombat spawn as a stand-in right now. I may pick up the throne spawn so that I'm able to get a custom wire cape for, but we still haven't gotten that like definitive spawn line normal Al Simmons spawn yet. So he had talked about like he wants to do, like he had done all these artworks where he's got like a giant cape, and he kind of wants to do those, but he's also like, that'd be a huge figure where it's not going to fit on your shelf. I would like to see something, because I'd asked him about like, are we going to see something with this year 2 Batman, do something similar with the spawn, and I think that's probably a little bit more likely. Probably not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a reuse of either of those capes. I think it'll be something a little bit different, but I'm pretty excited the way he was talking.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems, and that's what people like. Even people were joking, like posting when we were talking about how we did an interview, like the next figures are a million spawns, and it's like, I get maybe that thought, but I also don't think there, like you said, there's not really a definitive classic Spawn for me. Like first appearance type Spawn that looks how he did. Not a variant. Like I don't personally, that's the kind of toy I would want to get. So I'm hoping we get one, and I don't know. I think it'd be fun to just see his different takes on Batman. Like, I think Batman's such a versatile character. Like, that's why there's so many Spider-Mans, because so many people have worked on Spider-Man, so many people have worked on Batman. They both have tons of different suits. Like, that doesn't really bother me to just see more of them, because it's like, oh, that's cool. And then, I guess if you don't like it, you just don't have to buy it.
Right. And that,
You know?
I'm just now thinking of that, like how many people complain about the amount of Batmans that we get from McFarlane, but you don't hear half the amount of complaints from Hasbro about how many Spider-Mans we've gotten. So that's a little bit surprising to me, because I mean, I buy up a lot of the Spider-Mans. Some of them I pass on, but a lot of them I have. I mean, I will say that there are less Batmans that I like. I just kind of like the classic Batman, Year 2 Batman, Batman Beyond. Well, I say that I've got a whole shelf of Batmans up above me. But there are a lot of Batmans from McFarlane, but he's said before that like if he's going to sell to like a regular person in the store, chances are a kid wanting a toy is going to want Batman. They don't maybe necessarily know some of those more obscure figures that people are wanting. Like there's probably very few 8-year-olds out there asking for like a Mr. Miracle or something like that.
Unless he looks real cool.
That's true, unless he looks really cool. Todd does have similar ideas to me about I don't need to know the character as long as it looks cool. I'll take it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm excited to see his take, more takes of his art style or whatever on different characters, which leads to a very exciting tidbit of information. Maybe the most exciting for me, honestly,
Really?
was that he revealed that he had talked to Disney about doing some McFarlane-style Marvel figures.
Yes.
He talked about doing a Spider-Man, which I'd buy in a heartbeat. He talked about even doing a Venom, which I think would be really cool. And what was interesting to me was that he basically said, like, I think maybe not the near future, but I think inevitably I'll get to do that at some point.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. Like, that's pretty exciting to me. I don't know, how, like, if that's just kind of him being like, they'll see things my way eventually, or if it's like he feels like he has a lead, or I don't know. But I would love to see, him get to, because with Spider-Man, he would have to sculpt him in a way that he would be very posable, right? You can't really have a Spider-Man that can't get into crazy poses. So
True.
I almost think that'd be a good challenge for him.
Yeah.
To make a Spider-Man that's as detailed as his other stuff, or maybe not as detailed, but pretty detailed, but also has the posability of like a legend.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it would be amazing to get
cool
a
for me.
McFarlane 2-pack of Spider-Man and Lizard.
Oh, don't tempt me. Don't put those dreams in my head. But yeah, that was really exciting. I thought that was really cool that he brought that up.
He had mentioned that it would be cool.
He said that.
He mentioned that it would be cool to like have like anyone can do any figure from any line once. So he had mentioned like doing a McFarlane, like Spider-Man and McFarlane. Like he said Marvel, I imagine just like a Avengers type character. Like a McFarlane Star Wars, which I think a lot of those would be super cool. Do you have any off the top of your head other than Spider-Man that you wish Todd would be able to do? Like Star Wars or any other line?
Trying to think of a character. Oh, like a different line?
Yeah. Whether it's Marvel or Star Wars or anything.
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd like to see, I don't know, maybe those like Image, like a Conan the Barbarian. I think he'd do a cool Conan with some big old Conan cape, big old sword, you know what I'm
That's
talking
true.
about?
Yeah.
Maybe those like almost that Legendary Heroes line, like a Dread. Like if he just redid Legendary Heroes, so you got a Dread, you got a new Man, you got a new Conan, you got a new Rarl. Maybe throw in what's your boy?
Savage
Super
Dragon.
Patriot.
Super Patriot. Oh yeah, good point.
I know you'd like that with the big old cannon for a hand. So that to me, a McFarlane Legendary Heroes line would be top notch.
That would be awesome. I feel like I've got Zombie Cap on my desk here. I feel like he would make a really cool Marvel Zombies line. It would need to be better than the Deceased, though. The Deceased aren't quite zombified enough, but the Blackest Night ones look pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree.
So after that,
and then we got another reveal, right?
Yeah, Todd.
Reveal.
Todd brings out a dragon prototype that he's working on. So he had done some dragons in the past. I've seen some people post those in the groups, but pretty rarely. I don't see them very often at all. But it looks like he's getting back into the dragons. So, I mean, I'm going to at least get that dragon because he put it on the podcast. He showed me first. I got to get it. So he hooked me there. He's got at least one buyer. But, I mean, I'm starting to get interested in the Mythic Legions, but I think the dragon would go well with that. So it'll still go with my collection. And he had talked about how they were having a challenge of how do you put it in a box because you probably have to disassemble the wings or the tail or something like that to get it to fit. And he had talked about doing that with NBA players where there was some assembly required and people would call and be like, oh, my figures are broken. Like, they're not broken. You just need to put them together. So he was talking about those challenges, like make it a bigger box or make it assembled. So
yeah.
What did you think about the dragon, Jordan?
I mean, I didn't really realize he'd done dragons before, so I had to look that up. They do look cool. I don't know if they'd really fit in my collection, personally.
He showed you the dragon first, Jordan. You're not going to go buy the dragon?
I might need to see it, dude.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll play with yours, and then if I like it,
All right.
Get it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't imagine it's going to be something, like, it's probably not going to be posable. It's probably going to be like the commando spawn where it's just maybe you can move its head side to side, maybe the wings go up and down. It's just mostly a somewhat posable statue. That's my assumption anyway. Maybe it's going to be a fully articulated dragon. That would be pretty cool. I mean, then what's the point of HasLab doing a Fin Fang film? Just give me a green dragon from McFarlane. It'd probably be better.
And you could just pretend it's Fin Fang Foom.
Exactly.
And probably I guess, next thing I would say we did post on Facebook, Reddit, a couple other places, some a poll asking people what they wanted us to ask. The one of the more demanded topics I noticed was the status of the new Spawn movie, which I was real excited to talk about, and he talked about it for quite a bit, so I was pretty excited about
Yeah,
that.
I
I
mean
was
that's pretty
glad
much most of part two.
yeah, I was glad he talked about that. I mean, my two big takeaways from that is that it's still ongoing. That official news might be imminent, maybe during Comic Con, and he almost seemed like it's like basically either they're gonna agree to it and we're gonna do it, or I'm gonna run off and do it myself, my own way on my own time.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's pros and cons to both because that led into my other question, which was, does Todd think Spawn should be R or PG-13? He says he thinks it's an R. Something tells me if it's a big budget studio movie, it's going to be a PG-13. You and I were talking the other day about, could it be an HBO Max series? You know, could it be
Mm-hmm.
smaller scale, but still dark, but still like high-ish production value?
Right.
If I would have maybe asked him, like, has that been considered, or is it only being thought of as a movie? And then there's the question of, he wrote a screenplay, but maybe it's getting rewritten, and then maybe he'll get it direct, maybe not. So I don't know. I'm curious if he's like, if he was doing it himself, if he'd even direct it, because he kind of talked about maybe putting a team in place that he trusts to kind of help him out.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense, you know, his background is mainly comics and art. So it's like it would help to have someone help you out in the
Yeah.
translation to the screen. Um, but I don't know. Personally, I'm hoping for an R-rated Spawn HBO Max something.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could totally see it getting picked up, and I mean, even with the new Batman movie, like that was pretty dark, but still PG-13. So I could kind of see, like, I mean, maybe you just kind of off screen the violator rips somebody's heart out. You don't swear so much, and then it's kind of like on that verge, kind of like Batman was, where it's like, is this really PG-13 for kids? And so I don't know. I could maybe see that working out, but I agree, it does need to be R. And I think they could do a good job of with either way, whichever way they go. I'll be happy, but I would be super interested to see if no one picks it up and he has to say, like, all right, I'm gonna fund this myself. Make that his next Kickstarter. What are our tiers there? You can donate whatever to the movie. You get your name in the credits.
Oh,
You
were
donate
you
this
thinking that
much.
during the interview?
I wasn't thinking that until just now. But I mean, what's the price level of like each thing? Like this one gets you can be an extra. This one you get to be an extra plus go to the premiere, things like that.
This one, you get your heart ripped out by the violator.
Boom.
I like that thought.
Yeah. I think that would be very interesting for him to do. I think he could probably make quite a bit from that Kickstarter. I don't know how much he would need for it, but I don't know. I mean, I guess action figures can make him 3 million. Board games can make 15. I don't know what movies have ever pulled from Kickstarter, but I'm sure he'd break that record. A lot of people want to see the movie made.
He tends to do that.
Yeah. I think kind of with that, like where you were talking about, like he would put together a team and let the team run with it. He had mentioned that he was a big boy, and once he says yes to a project, he's comfortable that like he's not going to worry about that project after he's said yes. He's going to do his homework beforehand. Once the yes is made, it's going forward, and he's not going to hinder that by second guessing it, which I thought that was pretty cool. Just like, I don't know, taking that into like outside of Spawn and like into my own business. It's like, I need to have that same mentality of like, I have this plan in motion. It's happening. Don't second guess it, see it through, and then reassess after it's over. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool. I enjoyed that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he has a good understanding of, like, realistically what he can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of spills into my other thought, that was, he once had talked about Spawn outliving him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was kind of maybe a self-deprecating thing, but where he goes, well, yeah, I hope so. Spawn might be even better after I die.
Yeah.
Or, how he couldn't wait for Spawn. Why didn't Todd die sooner so these better Spawn writers could take over, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if he'll ever... I also thought of this too, of asking him if he's thought of doing like a 5-issue limited End of Spawn series,
Mm-hmm.
just so, like, wouldn't you want people to know the ending of your story the way you meant it? I don't know, like, if he's wrestled with that at all.
Maybe if it's just
Um,
so good, you're like, why do I need to know the story? This is how it ends. I'm happy with it.
that's true.
But I do want to know. I want to know what happens. What's the ending of Spawn? I don't know. Maybe we can chat with him off camera and see if he'll tell us. I'd be surprised if he would let that secret go, but
Probably wouldn't. He's an old veteran, remember? That's
yeah.
what he said. But yeah, I thought that was really cool. And then,
Yeah, I mean, going off your
yeah,
idea of like once he dies, somebody else will pick it up and they'll do a better job. I thought that was an interesting idea of like how he had said, like, if Stan Lee had wrote Spider-Man for 30 years, like he's wrote Spawn for 30 years, like Spawn has evolved. You can tell from like reading, like I'm reading the first compendium now and I'm reading the current issues, and it's pretty different how they're written and how even the art is and all that stuff. And he had said, like, with like Spider-Man or other characters like that, where Stan Lee will write it for a bit, somebody else will pick it up, and they're like, oh, I really love Stan Lee, I look up to him, I want to do kind of like, I want to pay homage to the person before me, and then the next person after that is like, oh, I want to do the same thing, I love Stan Lee and the new
he
person.
doesn't really
like,
evolve.
and it just kind of starts repeating, and you realize that after so many years you're kind of just reading the same story over and over, which I think is it's super accurate, because I realize that with a bunch of, like, how many crises can there be in the DC universe? We have a new one every other year where I don't even pay attention to it anymore, because it's like, there's going to be another one, and we're just repeating the same process over and over, where I think that's probably why Torment, Spider-Man's story, for you and I, are kind of like towards the top of our Spider-Man stories, because it's something different that we're not just constantly rereading. Like, it was a little bit darker. It was a different story. Lizard was way more of a villain.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just different. You're not going to reread that now, really. So
Yeah,
it was cool.
I agree. Yeah, and then he kind of summed it up at the end. I thought it was a nice little sentimental nugget to end on, when he kind of said, we were thanking him for his time, and he just said, I feel like we're way more impressed by other people than we are by ourselves, and at the end of the day, you just kind of feel like a schmuck who's doing his best, but it's nice to have people who support you. And I don't know, in a very real way, it was nice to see people engaging with the interview, not just for our sake, but just to be like, oh, we're doing something that is providing people with information or experience or an engagement of some kind. So to everyone who listened, I would say thank you, and thanks for our support, whoever's out there and out there in the world tuning in. We do appreciate it. And you got to stay tuned for our future developments. Dakota's going to be working hard to get the Hasbro team on here soon.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also like to get the X-Men animated team on here.
And X-Men,
I mean,
yes.
your cousin, our connection to Todd is also going to be doing stuff with Armor Wars, so who knows, maybe we're going to get somebody from Armor Wars on the podcast.
Who knows, really?
Yeah, we've got big things that are happening. I mean, with Todd McFarlane, I mean, it's kind of hard to, like, where do you go from there? In my mind, Todd is at the top of the comic book world right now, at least out of people who you can still interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, super awesome. Very glad we got to talk to him.
But we're just getting started, baby.
Ooh, we're just getting started, so stick around, stay
Awesome.
tuned. Make sure you're following us on Instagram. You can see some of those clips from the McFarlane interview. You got some sneak peeks there. You get to see our what you gots, all that good stuff. Interact, send us messages through that. So show us what you got. That's at The Strong Collectors on Instagram. Make sure whatever platform you're listening to, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Apple or Spotify, like it, subscribe to it, whatever the platform has in that regard. Like the videos, share the podcast, post us in the groups. We say that because we don't want to post in the groups and be all self-promoting, get blocked. So if you say, hey, listen to this podcast with these guys, they're super awesome, super cool, we totally agree with you, and we hope that the rest of the group agrees with you as well. So with that being said, stay strong.